The Marvel Cinematic Universe is teeming with popular characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Thor, Captain America, the Hulk, and Black Widow. But you're obviously aware of all these. The fact is there are thousands of characters in the franchise, whether that be on the big screen or the small screen, and the presence of some of those guys can go under the radar. In this video, we'll run you through some characters that most fans don't even realize are in the MCU. Before you leave us, remember to hit the subscribe button. It's the only way of making sure you're kept up to date with all of ScreenRant's great new videos. This year's Venom movie may have introduced Woody Harrelson's Cletus Cassidy to the Sony comic book movie universe, but there's actually another version of Carnage in the MCU. In the Jessica Jones TV series, Karl Malus was a biogeneticist at the IGH Research Laboratory, and in the comics, Malus had a short run as the superior Carnage. He has red glasses in the show, and perhaps they're a nod to his time as Carnage, who is of course very red in color. That's probably clutching at straws though. The Wizard is a speedster superhero in the comics, and he made a brief appearance in the Jessica Jones TV series too. He's called Robert Ford in the source material, but he was called Robert Coleman in the show, and he was a product of experimentation at the IGH research facility, although this version could only move super fast when he was scared. Interestingly, the comic book version gained his powers when his father, Emil, injected him with mongoose blood, and the TV version had a pet mongoose named Emil as a nod to that. Angela Del Toro is associated with Daredevil in the comics, but it was the Jessica Jones TV series in which she was mentioned, so we know she exists in the MCU. Luke Cage asked Jones to investigate a missing person, so she recommended Del Toro, calling her a good private investigator. She's a former FBI agent who took over the mantle of White Tiger from her uncle in the comics, and although she obviously hasn't been a superhero in the MCU yet, there's still time, assuming we actually get to see her eventually. After 3 seasons of mainly science and technology-based stories, the 4th season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shook things up by introducing the concept of demons and an alternate dimension named Hell. The Darkhold, a spell book, was also introduced in that same season, which means the powerful elder god Chithan must also exist in the MCU. And that's because in the comics, the Darkhold was created by Chithan, who's one of the most ancient forces of evil in existence. While the character didn't appear on the show, we now know he's definitely out there. It was very easy to miss the fact that minor Spider-Man villain known as the Tinkerer made his cinematic debut in 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming. The reasons behind that were obvious. He both looked absolutely nothing like his much older comic book counterpart, and the name Tinkerer was never actually mentioned. Michael Chernus played the character, whose real name is Phineas Mason, as a sort of a sidekick to Michael Keaton's Vulture, helping him to perfect his exosuit he used to fly and fight Spider-Man, as well as creating numerous other gadgets using Chitauri technology. In this year's Avengers Infinity War, Thanos went to the planet Vormir to obtain the Soul Stone and met with the Red Skull. Red Skull referred to Thanos as son of Alars, and in the comics, Alars is the real name of the character otherwise known as Mentor. Mentor is a powerful member of the Eternals, an offshoot of the evolutionary process that created humans. Given that Mentor exists in the MCU, it's fair to say the other Eternals do too, and that's a really exciting prospect for the franchise going forward. Bor was Odin's father and the former king of Asgard. He died in battle against the Dark Elves long before the first MCU movie, and we've briefly seen him in flashbacks, played by Tony Curran in 2013's Thor: The Dark World. Now that we know Valhalla, the place Asgardians go when they die, exists in the MCU, that's where Bor will be, along with countless other notable Asgardians. Could we see him brought into battle against Thanos in Avengers 4? If rumors of Thor recruiting an army from Valhalla are true, it's quite possible. Those of you familiar with the Ultimate Marvel Universe will undoubtedly know of Miles Morales. Well, he exists in the MCU too. In 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, audiences were introduced to Donald Glover's Aaron Davis, who is known as the Prowler in the comics. Davis just so happens to be Miles Morales' uncle, so if he exists in the franchise, his nephew must as well. Interestingly, for years, Glover was actually linked with the role of Morales, and you have to think, therefore, that casting him as the character's uncle was intentional on Marvel Studios' part. In 2008's The Incredible Hulk, some of the Hulk's blood dripped into a wound in Samuel Stern's head, causing a visible mutation. In the comics, Stern is the Leader, a Hulk villain who possesses telepathic powers. We now know he possesses those powers in the MCU too, because of the 2012 comic The Avengers Prelude, Fury's Big Week. In the comic, which is canon to the movies, Black Widow found the mutated Sterns and was forced to shoot him and take him into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Hopefully, we'll see him in a movie again one day. Everyone loves the Hulk, he's one of the most popular MCU characters, but there are other Hulks in the franchise too. In the comics, Bruce Banner is isn't the only man who's transformed into a giant green rage monster, and one of the others is Amadeus Cho. Cho had a run as the totally awesome Hulk starting in 2015, and the character has actually been in the MCU since 2008. He was a student at Culver University in the Incredible Hulk movie, but will we ever see him transform into a green Goliath? Time will tell. Pretty much everyone's heard of Red Hulk by now, but not everyone realizes who the character really is, and he's been in the MCU for 10 years. General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross first appeared in 2008's The Incredible Hulk, and has since appeared in 2016's Captain America Civil War and this year's Avengers Infinity War. In the comics, it's Ross who is the first Red Hulk, a super strong character who gets hotter the angrier he becomes. He became Red Hulk to better combat the original Hulk, and that would be awesome to see in live action. In Marvel's comics, the most powerful being in existence is the one above all. It's the supreme being, the god, if you will, of the Marvel Universe, and its power dwarfs anybody else's, including somebody wielding the Infinity Gauntlet. But the second most powerful character is the Living Tribunal, and the Living Tribunal is confirmed to exist in the MCU. In 2016's Doctor Strange, Karl Malus used a weapon called the Staff of the Living Tribunal, which contained a portion of the cosmic being's power. If it was to show up in the franchise, things would get very interesting. Another character seen on the Grandmaster's Tower of Champions was the ferocious Bi-Beast. In the comics, Bi-Beast is a monstrous-looking two-headed android, one of which was given a knowledge of warfare, and the other a knowledge of culture. It was created a long time ago by an avian race that were actually a subspecies of the Inhumans, who obviously already exist in the MCU with their own TV show. It's classically a Hulk villain, and it would be awesome to see it going up against Mark Ruffalo's version of the character in live action. One of the more bizarre characters who's out there lurking in the MCU is Man-Thing. Man-Thing is the alter ego of scientist Dr. Theodore Sallis in the Marvel Universe. When his car crashed into a swamp, a synergistic interaction of mystical energy and swamp mutagens transformed him into a large, slow-moving, empathic humanoid swamp monster composed of vegetable matter. He was mentioned by Maria Hill in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and more recently was seen in 2017's Thor Ragnarok on the Grandmaster's Tower, which featured former champions of the gladiatorial arena on Sakaar. Although there's been no solid evidence of Magneto himself existing in the MCU, the fact the fruits of his loins exist there suggests he's definitely in it. In the comics, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are Magneto's children, so when those characters emerged in 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, we were convinced about Magneto. Given that Disney are on the verge of acquiring Fox, it would definitely seem as though there's a plan to bring the Master of Magnetism to the MCU, and the seeds were planted for that when his kids were introduced to the franchise. The most recognizable face on the Grandmaster's Tower of former champions was undoubtedly that of Beta Ray Bill. Bill is a Korbinite warrior who in the comics was given an enchanted Asgardian weapon by Odin after proving himself worthy of wielding Thor's warhammer Mjolnir. However, in the source material, Bill's weapon is called Stormbreaker, and given that Stormbreaker is the name of Thor's new weapon in the MCU as of Avengers Infinity War, it's currently a mystery regarding what weapon this version of Bill is going to use out there in the cosmos. The most exciting inclusion on the Grandmaster's Tower of former champions is Aries. Aries is the Greek god of war, and his presence in the MCU means there are other godly pantheons out there, in addition to the Norse gods of Asgard. His father Zeus, Hercules, Prometheus, Pluto, and Apollo are just some of the others who must exist in the MCU now that we know Aries does. Aries has been both a villain and an anti-hero in the comics, and seeing him in the MCU, possibly having a rivalry with Thor, would be amazing. We haven't seen many true cosmic entities in the MCU, but we absolutely know that they exist. In 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, we saw pictures of 4 of them inside the Temple Vault on Morag, and holograms of them in the Collector's Museum. The first of them was Death, with whom Thanos is obsessed with in the comics. Some people believed Hela was the MCU's equivalent, but now we know the true Death exists in the MCU. We have to wonder if we'll ever see it, and will Thanos be in love with it? Another of the cosmic entities that was shown in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy was Entropy. To give their existence in the MCU some context, the cosmic entities were shown to be the creators of the Infinity Stones, the powerful relics that were recently wielded by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. In spite of that, Entropy's true purpose is destruction. He's essentially the god of destroying things, which puts him in a constant struggle with Eternity, whose goal is creation, and who also happens to be Entropy's father. Entropy's father is another of the cosmic entities shown in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy. Eternity is the timeless representation of the universe itself, and has unlimited control of reality as a result. Given that Eternity is timeless, time doesn't affect him at all, meaning proving he doesn't age. In 2017's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Peter Quill claimed to have witnessed eternity when his father caused him to go into a hypnotic state. In the comics, eternity can warp space into a gigantic humanoid manifestation that can be perceived by lesser beings. The final cosmic entity responsible for creating the Infinity Stones, as seen in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, is Infinity. Infinity is aptly named, given the stones it helped create, and is said to be the sister of Eternity. Infinity represents all the space in the universe, and both she and her brother are in constant competition with Death, who attempts to reduce life while they expand it. It'd make sense for Infinity to step in and undo what Thanos did in Avengers Infinity War, but whether or not it'll happen remains to be seen. Not all the characters you didn't realize were in the MCU are cool. In fact, some of them are pretty lame. In the Daredevil TV series, in Melvin Potter's workshop, there was a fun little Easter egg confirming the existence of a rather silly villain, Stilt Man. In the comics, his real name is Wilbur Day, and while he's mainly a Daredevil villain, he's also fought the likes of Thor and Iron Man. The lower part of his suit, the long stilt-like legs, could be seen in the workshop, so maybe he'll appear on screen too. In the comics, there was an inhuman geneticist named Avidar, and he believed that his race shouldn't have to do any physical work. Consequently, he created a race of subhuman servants who became known as Alpha Primitives, who were all brawn and no brain. The Emancipation episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saw Hive ordering Holden Radcliffe to turn regular humans into Inhumans. Radcliffe's subsequent Alpha test resulted in the creation of an obedient, powerful, and semi-sentient group called the Primitives, who were clearly the MCU version of the Alpha Primitives from the comics. In the comics, the Guardians of the Galaxy have had an additional member called Cosmo, and he's a dog. As a Soviet test animal, he speaks fluent Russian, as well as some broken English, and possesses tremendous psychic powers. Otherwise, he looks like a perfectly normal canine. In 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, he was briefly seen twice on Nowhere, where he's the chief of the space station in the source material. He growled at Rocket Raccoon, then spent some time chilling with the Collector and Howard the Duck. Who's a good boy? Union Jack is essentially a British version of Captain America, although his methods are more reminiscent of the Punisher, and he's actually appeared in the MCU. His alter ego appeared in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger, believe it or not, alongside his American counterpart. J.J. Field played James Montgomery Falsworth, who was a British prisoner of war being held captive by Hydra. It would be pretty cool to see Falsworth suit up as Union Jack in a future spin-off, but if we're honest with ourselves, that's very unlikely to happen. Did you realize any of these characters were in the MCU? Can you think of any more that most people aren't aware of? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ScreenRant for more great videos just like this one. Bye for now.